Story 1. When my mother would read me stories with different voices for each character, I realize now how talented she was at keeping me entertained. Story 2. The belief that every other child in my class had both a mother and a father at home, lived in a decent house, had enough to eat, and took a vacation every year. Story 3. Someone else taking charge. I never needed to be the one to make the phone calls, keep track of everything, or be the responsible person. I miss that. Story 4. For me, it was time spent with family, as others said. Family time included late-night stories and watching my parents when they were young and energetic. Story 5. Mom's cooking is wonderful, especially her pies. All I want for my birthday is her fried chicken, but I hesitate to ask her to go through all the fuss. Story 6. Lots of energy and enthusiasm. The ability to climb trees. The ability to fall down, jump up, and keep going. Story 7. Being blissfully unaware of how men perceive you and lacking the ability to understand their thoughts as they gaze at you. Story 8. Ignorance and lack of real responsibilities made life easy, even in my early 20s. My friends and I would occasionally go to the woods in the middle of the night, have a fire, and drink with no obligations other than our low-paying jobs. Story 9. When I lived in Antrim, I could get bags of tiny fried donuts with cinnamon sugar at a small booth near Junction 1. We moved when I was 5, and there was nowhere in my town that had them. We've just moved again, and at the age of 18, I found a booth with the exact same donuts. I had them the other day, and they are amazing. Story 10. Having energy and good health. I was just diagnosed with cancer, and it has dimmed everything in my life. I am also trying to work 2 jobs to pay the medical bills. Being a child was so easy. Someone else took care of me. Story 11. We used to do a big convoy from Florida to New York. 6 families would load up in their vans and make the drive. It was only a 17 to 18-hour trip, but cousins would switch vans and we would all hang out. It was fun for us, the kids. Each van had something different, such as various snacks and TVs with different movies. This made the trips go by quickly. Now, I couldn't imagine doing that drive with all my cousins. I always fly up whenever anyone suggests driving. Story 12. Freedom and energy, curiosity and constant discovery. The world was vibrant and compelling as a child. Everything was new. Can you imagine the beginning of life and my first impressions? I took that significance for granted. Story 13. Lying on the couch, I stared up at the ceiling and imagined what it would be like to live up there. Stepping over thresholds because of the door frames and sitting around the ceiling lights like a campfire felt intriguing. I don't know why I thought it would be so cool, but it was a great daydream. Story 14. Daydreaming. When you're a kid, it's easy to visualize a daydream. As an adult, it feels like the image is an old sepia-toned photograph. Story 15. Not being concerned with bills or money. Everything is automatically provided for you without a single thought. Story 16. The feeling of walking around the neighborhood on a summer night was totally carefree. It is one of the occasions I remember just being in the moment. It was one of those simple experiences that spanned from when I was a little kid into my teenage years. Story 17. The landline telephone without caller ID brings a unique feeling of anticipation. I miss the excitement when the phone rings, thinking, oh, I won't answer that. Now, we often filter our calls, or sometimes our phones do that for us. I appreciate not having to constantly set boundaries because people call just to talk because they like you. Story 18. This is specifically from my childhood. I was a kid of the 1980s and 1990s. The mystery of outings and adventures. If you went to a concert and lost your group, sometimes you had to make new friends for just the event or spend time enjoying activities on your own. Now everything is planned and prepared. There are no more mysteries to going out, and everything can be calculated to the minute of your experience. Story 19. The deep quiet that comes with snowfall is remarkable. There is no one outside, just an unusual silence mixed with the baffling effect of a heavy storm. Story 20. Holiday family visits with all 17 of my cousins and 5 aunts and uncles. I rarely see anyone anymore. I wouldn't even recognize most of my family if they passed me on the street. Story 21. Trick-or-treating is a significant experience for many children, as it is often their first time being on their own with peers. I consider it one of the most nostalgic holidays due to the mixed feelings of childhood and newfound independence. It's unfortunate that this tradition has largely been replaced by the more community-oriented trunk-or-treating. Story 22. Sleepovers at friends' houses. Popular movie finally coming out on VHS. Your first kiss and your first boyfriend or girlfriend. Recess. The last day of school before summer break. Visiting your cool uncle. On an early summer morning, you have your friends, your bikes, and a whole town at your disposal. There's no particular plan, the freedom to go as far as the bikes will carry you, and nobody has to check in or be home until the streetlights come on. Story 23. Lying on my bed in my room by an open window, doing nothing but noticing the trees and listening to the birds. Story 24. I miss how, as a child, the future seemed exciting and life was full of possibilities. I had no idea what I was going to do when I grew up, but I knew it would be amazing. I miss that. These days, it just feels like a struggle, doesn't it? Story 25. Every Christmas, we would have my mother's parents over for dinner, and on Boxing Day, we would stay overnight at my father's parents' house. At my father's parents', my grandmother would cook for about 20 of us, and we would all squeeze in. She would then invite other family members and friends over in the evening, which was my favorite part of the year. Story 26. Having parents. When you are used to spending holidays with your father and it seems normal, then your mother passes away right in front of you, and your dad abandons you. You learn quickly that he was a narcissist who only cared when it was convenient and never stopped his new wife from neglecting and abusing you, which is how your mother got custody in the first place. It's a sobering experience, and you realize that your family is only there when it's convenient for them. Story 27. Halloween. The smell of candy mixed in a bag on a crisp autumn night. The costumes and Halloween specials create a unique atmosphere. The sights and scents of strangers' houses as they open the door add to the charm. Story 28. Novelty is about learning things you have never seen or heard of before. It involves feeling a spark of curiosity that drives you to explore deeper and imagine new possibilities. Story 29. Going to the playground, meeting a random kid, and having a fantastic day playing together. Who is this kid? I don't know. What's her name? I don't know. Who is her mom? I don't know. Where does she live? I don't know. Where does she go to school? I don't know. Why are you asking all these questions? That's not what we discussed. Story 30. Imagination. There came a time when I realized that the things I created in my mind could not possibly happen, and that is when my imagination lost its magic. Story 31. Believing that the world was all sunshine and rainbows, that everyone was happy, loved, and good. Story 32. Just being able to enjoy something for the sake of enjoyment, not because you need a break or distraction, or because you've set aside time to finally engage with it. You did something simply because you wanted to, without worrying about when you should be doing something else. Story 33. Freedom. On weekends, I would ride my bike across town and spend time at my friend's house with his brothers. We would spend the entire weekend outside, running around and having fun. Now that we are adults, these same friends wouldn't dream of letting their kids run around unsupervised. Story 34. Filling a jar with fireflies, taking a bubble bath with the lights out, and then releasing them after I was all clean. Story 35. Never having experienced loss because everyone you have ever known is still alive and pets were set free or went to live on a farm. Story 36. My dad would give me rides around the house on his shoulders so I could touch all the random things that were normally out of my reach. He did this almost every night before I went to bed. Story 37. When I was a child, I often dreamed I could fly. I flew over the neighborhood and the school. I could just fly around without wings. Sometimes I would fly too high and scare myself, but I always woke up feeling completely elated and happier than ever. I hate that those dreams went away. I miss them. They were magical. Story 38. Summers were truly magical. I would run wild, doing whatever I wanted and spending all day outside. The ice cream truck would come through the neighborhood, and there would be sleepovers with no worries. I loved visiting my grandparents 1,000 miles away and staying there for weeks. I remember the 4th of July parade in their small town and seeing my cousins. When I feel nostalgic for my childhood, those summers are what I miss most. Story 39. Super niche, but Orthodox Easter midnight services hold a special place in my memory. I no longer attend church, but I recall those moments fondly. We stayed up late, wore fancy clothes, and drove to church in the dark. We received our candles at the door. The church was completely dark at the beginning, and when they sang the resurrection hymn, someone lit their candle, passing the flame around until everyone's candles were lit. Some churches featured fireworks and rang the bells, and we usually went outside to sing the hymn several times. When we returned home, we enjoyed avgolemono soup, which is much better than it sounds. Everyone stayed up until 4 a.m., knowing that the whole family would gather to celebrate the next day. However, since my grandmother passed away, I haven't seen my cousins in years, and my parents no longer host gatherings. I left the church a few years ago for personal reasons, as it no longer aligned with my belief system. Yet, in the back of my mind, I will always miss these cherished moments. Story 40. Family gatherings were a time of joy. My mother and her sisters would take turns hosting. The men would go to the pub while the sisters prepared dinner. There was always something to do. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, and it was usually a bit cold. However, it was wonderful to hear the aunties laughing, and when the uncles, who were often a bit tipsy, returned, the laughter would continue. Story 41. True boredom, unlike today where you have smartphones, the internet, streaming services, and more, meant using your imagination or making up games. Story 42. Chickens. I will likely never have them again, but they were my responsibility, and I loved them. They came running to me for food and cackled softly when I locked them in at night. They were fierce mothers to their chicks, and the baby chicks were adorable. Story 43. Hope. I never had it easy, but it was more magical than I realized to be young and have hope that I could achieve my goals, do something important, be truly content, or that the struggle would be over someday and I could rest. When you realize it's never going to happen, it hits hard. Story 44. Fireflies, cousins being best friends, naive to everything, living under my parents' roof after they separated and then reconciled when I was 5. Life was great after that. Alone time, best friends for life, not realizing they weren't for life, not understanding what anxiety was. Story 45. Sleeping on my grandmother's sleeping porch under sheets dried on the clothesline by the sun and wind was a comforting experience. The sheets and her garden smelled delightful. The symphony of crickets and passing trains served as my lullabies. Story 46. The unique feeling of being outside on a warm summer night on a neighbor's lawn with friends. Fireflies blinking on and off. Having nothing to do. Nowhere to be. And no obligations. Just possibilities. Story 47. Picking vegetables in Grandma's garden. She always planted 2 rows of strawberries for the children and filled baskets with blackberries for blackberry pies. Story 48. The ability to tumble and fall with some grace and minimal resulting injury. They laugh and then check on you. Now, it's simply a fall from grace that is often injurious. They check on you first, then laugh about it. Story 49. Being able to eat gluten without discomfort is a relief. Adult-onset food allergies and intolerances can be more challenging than having them from an early age because you are acutely aware of what you are missing. Story 50. Just dancing in the supermarket and not caring about the perceptions of adults. I know I could do that now, but I would be heavily judged, if not reported to social services for irresponsible parenting while breaking it down in the bread aisle with my toddler in the cart. Story 51. Staying up all night, I read fan fiction the whole time, and it was so peaceful. Now I have to be in bed by 9 p.m. and nap during the day to keep going. Story 52. Fireflies are fascinating to watch. I also miss seeing love bugs. They seem to appear less often now. Story 53. Riding my bike until I saw a pile of other bikes, either at the park or at home, and knowing everyone was here. There were no plans or set times, just finding my friends. Story 54. The way my parents cooked was a personal, relational kind of magic that wouldn't mean the same thing to anyone else, even if they tasted the food. I didn't recognize its significance until I could no longer enjoy it. Story 55. My dad's laughter slayed me as a child. Just when I was falling back in love with him in my late teens, he died. It was a real bummer. Story 56. Sledding with plastic sleds or those with metal rails every winter was a joy. I lived right next to a giant hill. Daytime naps. Can we bring those back? I think I need them more now. Having dinner with the family every night around the table was special. Story 57. I grew up on an exotic animal farm. My parents negotiated our rent by offering to work as farm help since the owners were getting older. We had about 20 buffalo, over 100 cows, llamas, alpacas, miniature donkeys, peacocks, emus, and a zebra. Now that I live in the city, I look back fondly on my childhood. We were quite poor at the time, but as a child on a farm, it felt like we were very rich. Story 58. Wish chips. An older friend told me that potato chips folded in half were magic and that you could make a wish when you found one. I totally believed it and still get a bit excited about wish chips, even though I usually eat kettle chips, and half of them fold up when they cook. Story 59. Being able to go to my room and sit in silence by myself for hours makes me feel fortunate. Nowadays, I am lucky to get even 5 minutes of it. I really miss that time. Story 60. Taking the TV guide and creating a schedule to not miss the yearly holiday specials and movies like Garfield, Frosty, Rudolph, and Prancer. I would sit at the table and highlight in different colors, prioritizing which ones were most important to watch. Story 61. I lived in a townhouse complex designed for college professors and faculty. They assumed there would be families, so there was a playground and some large, climbable trees. Playing manhunt with the other neighborhood kids, riding our bikes, playing in the sandbox, swinging on the swings, and climbing trees was the best time of our lives, something I miss dearly. Story 62. My dad used to call the tooth fairy when I lost a tooth. He would give detailed instructions about where we lived and which room was mine. He would stay on the phone and chat with her for about 5 minutes. I would sit at the kitchen table and nearly faint from excitement. Story 63. Not having to live with the knowledge that people can be uninformed, unmotivated, dishonest, greedy, unprincipled, and manipulative. Story 64. At the edge of my neighborhood, there was an overgrown vacant lot where a surprising number of people spent their time. It featured muddy ditches filled with turtles, frogs, snakes, and salamanders. Kids visited every summer to build tree houses. There was also an old abandoned car that we pretended was a spaceship. Eventually, the entire area was paved over and transformed into a business park. Story 65. I have a large family, and one particular uncle was very humble. He had a junkyard, and as kids growing up in the country, we all got together at family gatherings. It was our group of cousins, enjoying the freedom of the junkyard. We built the coolest bikes and had fun, not realizing we were making lasting memories. Everyone made a fuss about it that summer. It felt magical to me. Story 66. Riding in the back of the minivan and reclining the seats at night, I watched the stars and streetlights as we passed by. Story 67. Afternoon naps. I used to dislike them as a child, only to realize their importance after growing up. Story 68. The Brock's Candy Pick-a-Mix stand at the grocery store allows you to drop a nickel into the metal box and take a piece of candy. Story 69. Chilling with my parents in the caravan during the holidays. Watching television late in the evening while eating simple food. Sitting in cozy dim light as a mild rain patters on the metal roof. I would do this with my kids, but my wife dislikes caravanning. Story 70. Having a close group of friends and enjoying sleepovers can be fulfilling. It can feel extremely isolating when you no longer have that connection. Story 71. When I was very small, I distinctly recall the sensation of wrapping myself in a towel after getting out of the bath, feeling uniquely euphoric. I have longed to experience that again my entire life. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.